This is the Jeremiah Show. Today, we welcome our special guest, singer, songwriter, and producer, HARGO. HARGO was raised in a yoga ashram in New Mexico. From the sacred rhythms of mantra and kirtan to modern rock and HARGO's electronic landscapes, his music is meditation for our shared human experience. HARGO is here to share his new song, over 20 years in the making. It's called Cryin for John Lennon. The song was written in 2004 during a time of global unrest, post 9/11 and the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, and it's framed as a heartfelt call for peace. Cryin for John Lennon was finally completed and scheduled for release on October 3rd, 2025, coinciding symbolically with what would have been John Lennon's 84th birthday. The single is out now. There is a story that accompanies the making of this song, and it has many twists and turns. Still, one that I find very intriguing is the cross-generational narrative and the production of Cryin for John Lennon. In the song, the paths of multiple generations converge to create one beautiful song. John Lennon is the 1960s peace icon. Phil Spector is the iconic producer. HARGO is a spiritual musician blending mantra plus rock, and musicians Christian Love and producer Nate Rubin are the younger generation carrying the torch. The anthem speaks to perseverance, timing, and the way art can sit and grow until the moment is just right. Like Lennon, HARGO's life and art beautifully intertwine music with a message. Welcome, HARGO.
Thanks, Jeremiah. Happy to be here, man.
Good to have you here. So, is the timing for this song right now? And if so, why?
Well, it must be because I certainly didn't see this coming. Kind of like you were sharing, just a few moments ago. I wrote this song when I was 19 years old, or something like that, and recorded it almost 20 years ago now. And yeah, we can get into the story of how that all happened, but I definitely didn't see it taking this long for the song to finally be heard. And for whatever reason, now's the time, and as I look around in the world, I actually start to understand why. So yes, now is the time.
So, do you feel that the delay in the release from the moment, from the time that you wrote the song to now, do you think it all happened for a reason? Do you feel that way? That it took the time it needed? Yeah. I think it's the time for it now too. It's a beautiful message.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
so
feel like, well,
go ahead.
We'll get into the story. No, that's it.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about the story. So here's my first question. Really, it took over 20 years to release it, but you said that the initial songwriting happened very quickly for you. You were in your parents' converted garage studio when the phrase came to you, "I'm crying for John Lennon."
Yeah.
And the first draft only took you about 2 hours. What was happening inside you at that moment that made the song come to you and then so fast to write, flow so quickly?
Yeah, it was a trip, man. I don't think I've experienced anything quite like that in all the years of writing songs, and I've been writing songs since I was 8 years old. So that's a lot of songs.
Yeah.
It just, it literally was one of those experiences where I was playing my guitar and doing a real simple chord progression, and just out of nowhere, the phrase "crying for John Lennon" came into my mind, and I was like, whoa, what? And then I felt chills right away. I just happened again. And I was like, okay, what's that about? And I started singing, and it was literally like I heard somebody singing the song to me, and I was just translating it. It just, I was experiencing the song the way other people get to hear it for the first time. That happened to me, and so it blew my mind, and I was just like, whoa, and so as the song kind of kept going, it's like I didn't know where it was going to go next or what was the next part of the story until the song was complete. And it literally was written, you know, pretty much in about 20 minutes, something like that. It was really fast.
Wow. So you felt like a conduit to it. It just flowed through you.
Yeah. Yeah, it really did. It really did.
Um, John Lennon was a dreamer, right? He dared everybody to join him in his dreams. And, he turned pain, his pain, our pain, into melodies. He turned rebellion into poetry. And his lifelong pursuit was peace. Do you feel at all that you've picked up the torch and you carry some of those things that made John Lennon who he was, what he stood for? Are you a part of that
I feel like I'm
movement?
a part of it. Yeah. I feel so connected to it. And I always have since I was a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I grew up listening to the Beatles and like so many people, and I just immediately was drawn to John's voice and his message, and then later his solo stuff, and I think what I relate to the most about it is it's not so much about John personally, although I think he had some incredible qualities just as a human being, but the vision and the power of vision. If you've ever read the book Ishmael by Daniel Quinn, but he talks about that and he says, there's nothing more powerful than vision. It changes culture, and changing cultures change the shape of the world. And so, yeah, I mean, that's my belief. And I've
That's so
seen
true.
this time and again. So I think whether it's right or wrong, or you agree or you disagree with the vision, even just inspiring people to think about what their vision is something and is important.
Yeah, I agree so much. So true. You described how the song came to you and how it just opened you up. But what is the meaning to you behind the song? Why do you think you were chosen to receive this song and then translate it and bring it to life? What is that meaning? How do you interpret the meaning of the song?
Hmm. Well, I mean, I think it's a really direct song. I guess you could interpret it multiple ways, but I feel like it's pretty straightforward in that, just the amount of pain and suffering in the world is so great and has been. We could say that it's, more poignant than ever right now, but I think really just for millennia, this world has been in a lot of pain, and um, it doesn't have to be that way. And I think there's this idea that that's just the way things are, but it doesn't have to be that way. And to me, that's the message of Imagine. That's why it's called Imagine. Imagine that things aren't this way. That they can
Mm-hmm.
be another way. And I think that was the message he was sharing, and that's what when I hear Crying for John Lennon, that's what crying about that means. It means the feeling the distance between where we are and what that vision for a better world is, and the longing to create that, and for other people to wake up to that idea if that's something they want to wake up to. But it's possible. And so that, to me, that's what the song is really about. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
And if you could, Argo, if you could snap your fingers and bridge that gap in humanity that we just can't seem to bridge, that we can't make the connection all the way. We repeat ourselves, over and over in history. If you could make one wish, how do you think we would accomplish? What do we need to get rid of to make that connection?
I think it's that we need to get rid of an unwillingness to put ourselves in someone else's shoes and to really feel into what someone else's pain or someone else's dreams or yearning might be, not only our own. And when we're able to do that and really actually do it, not just say, oh, it must be tough for them. It's like, no, like really feel it. Things change. And even if it just changes a little bit, that's more than we have now. And I think that just takes you one step closer, to recognizing the reality that we all pretty much want the same thing.
Yeah, that's true. And we all want that, but I don't understand why we can't get that, because we all want that. Understand, we just can't seem to get there.
That's so frustrating. But I also think that it kind of makes sense in that, you think about how many wars there have been and how many generations have been shaped by war, and, parents who've been through like the Great War, World War II, like these kinds of things, and the effect that has on an entire family,
and generations.
Your father comes home, generations, man. Yeah. And it just keeps getting passed down. And so it takes so long, for these things to unwind. And that's if there's even any awareness that something needs to change,
Right.
And it takes time for even that to happen. And I feel like that really started to happen in the 60s. And I wish I'd been there to witness it in person, but just bringing awareness to, hey, we can do things a different way. And just having that dialogue alone is like, oh, like with the space that's opened up, I think has really set the stage for the positive things that are happening right now.
Cryin for John Lennon was the last recording project Phil Spector ever worked on before his incarceration and eventual death. How did the song catch the attention of this legendary music producer? And for the listeners, if you don't know Phil Spector, you worked with the Beatles, John Lennon, and so many other great artists. How did he catch his attention, HARGO?
Yeah, because
I did a lot of research and I couldn't find that story. And if you can't tell it, you can tell me to move on. Okay.
I'll tell you the story, and for a while I couldn't for various reasons.
Yeah, that's probably why I couldn't find that answer. I was looking so much, but I know everybody's out there wondering. They're wondering how they got to him.
So I wrote "Crying for John Lennon" when I was 18, 19, and I recorded that simple version, and I made basically like a demo CD of 7 or 8 songs I had written at the time. My dad is a musician. He taught me to play music at a young age, and he's my biggest fan. A typical, father is like, my son's the greatest thing of all time. I'm going to tell the world, right? And he saw that I had something at an early age and with music, and he really encouraged it and has always been super supportive. So he heard "Crying for John Lennon," and he was just blown away by it. And he said, we've got to figure out how to get this to people who are connected to John Lennon. So he looked up johnlennon.com and found this link at the bottom, said like webmaster, blah, blah. He's like, I'm going to email this guy. And so he emailed the webmaster of john-lennon.com, I think is what it was. And so he sent him the thing, and, he told me he did that. And then a couple hours later, he gets a phone call.
Couple hours.
This guy, Mark, literally, it was like all very quickly. And this guy said, hi, my name's Mark Elsis. I'm the owner of johnlennon.com. And I just got your email and I've been listening to this song, man. And it's amazing. It's awesome. I've heard it about 5 times. And he said, who are you guys? And so we started talking and hopped on a call with him and just hit it off. And he told us his story. And, obviously just a huge John Lennon Beatles fan. And he was, we kind of carried the conversation forward over, I don't know, couple of months or something. And then he said, hey, I have a documentary that I've been making called Strawberry Fields. And it's about people going to Central Park in New York every year for John's birthday memorial to this Strawberry Fields site where they have the Imagine mosaic right near the Dakota building where John and Yoko lived. And it's a spot dedicated to John. He said, people go there every year and I've been documenting that. And I'm just about done with the documentary. And I'd love to have your song at the end of the film. What do you think? And I was like, of course, that would be epic. I would love that. Absolutely. And he said, okay, cool. Well, why don't we get you to fly to New York? I'll send a couple of my guys out there to shoot you and play it at Strawberry Fields. And it would be great to have that for the film. And so I said, okay, I hopped on a plane. I flew out to New York. It was like February. It was freezing. And I'm in Central Park, like in a little whatever to be film ready, right? Like in my blazer, like freezing, like playing Crying for John Lennon. And afterwards, I get a call from Mark, and he says, "Hey," he's like, "How did it go?" I said, "It went great." He said, "Well, I got some interesting news." I said, "What's that?" He said, "I sent letters out to everybody associated with John Lennon that I could think of who's still alive to see who would want to contribute an interview to this film, and I only got one response. It's like, okay." He said, "Guess who it's from?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Phil Spector." And I said, "What?" Like, I said, "Isn't he in jail?" He said, because the trial was like, not even the trial at that point, but just the news. It was like everywhere for a while.
Yeah.
And then it's like it kind of subsided and then it wasn't in the news anymore. But I was like, so what? I don't even know what happened, And he said, no, he's not in jail. His trial hasn't even started. There have been all these delays, and he, says he's innocent, and he wants to, and he's never done an interview on John Lennon. He doesn't know, how much time he has left or what's going to happen, and he wants to do this interview, and he wants to be part of the film. And so we're going to go to LA, and we're going to shoot him for the film at his house, and that's going to happen in 3 weeks. I was like, whoa, dude, what epic. And so he said, do you want to come? And I was like, of course I want to come. And he said, okay, well, we'll just pretend you're part of my film crew. You can grab like a C stand or something, carry it in, and then just hang out for the interview. So I said, okay, I'll be there. So we go up there, we walk in, we're setting up, the whole film crew's there, we're waiting for Phil. And then in walks this old lady in a 1960s suit with wide lapels and beetle boots on and a blonde wig. And that's Phil Spector. I was like, oh, man. Whoa. Talk about a blast from the past. I mean, it was like, wow, and he sits down and, gets kind of situated, and he almost reminded me of Al Pacino a little bit.
In a dress.
And, kind of, yeah. So he sits down at the couch and starts this interview. And Mark was like, the guy's obsessed with John Lennon, so he knew everything. Like his knowledge of Phil and the history and all this stuff was ridiculous. And the interview was fantastic. It was honestly one of the best interviews of any kind that I've ever heard. It blew my mind. And Phil was really enjoying it and telling some incredible stories that he'd never told ever, because he's kind of a reclusive guy. He didn't really do interviews and things. So, behind him is the piano that Imagine was recorded on, and different of them just like tripping out, like, whoa.
Yeah.
So
and
after the interview,
how many weeks, just to put the time frame from the moment your dad reached out, from the song to sending the song to now you're sitting in his living room. How much time had passed? Sounds like it was a whirlwind.
I mean, I don't remember exactly. It seemed like it was a matter of months, maybe
Quick.
3, 4 months, something like that. Yeah, it all happened pretty fast is how at least it felt that way at the time for sure. It's like, whoa. Um, so anyway, after the interview, Mark introduced me to Phil and he says, "Hey, this is Hargo. His song's going to be at the end of the film. He wrote this song called Crying for John Lennon. Can we play it for you?" And I was so nervous. I didn't even know what I was like silent. I was like, hi. And so Phil says, "Okay, yeah, we'll go into my pool room. We'll listen to it." And he listened all the way through it. And then he turned around and he said, "Do you have the lyrics?" And I was like, "No." And then Mark like pulled it out of a file folder. Like he had my lyrics, there. I was like, whoa, this guy's incredible. And he hands it to Phil and Phil reads the lyrics and he says, "Yeah, this is exactly the kind of thing that John would have given me back in the day." He said,
Wow.
"You remind me of a young John Lennon."
Wow.
And I am just stunned by that and deeply honored and, didn't quite know what to do with it. But so then Mark asked him if he would produce a version of the song for the film, which I couldn't believe the balls on this guy. And I said, and Phil said, "Well, I'm kind of busy, about to start a trial. I'm retired,
Got a little bit going
et
on.
cetera." Yeah, a lot going on. And he's like, "I'll think about it." And um, so I was on my way out. His bodyguard grabbed an extra copy of my CD and he's like, "Phil wants to hear it in the Mercedes while he drives around LA." He's like, "He really digs your song, dude. I'm telling you." He gets stacks of CDs. He listens for a second, throws them in the trash. So fast forward, and I know we're running out of time, so I'll just keep it kind of short. But we ended up finishing the song about a month later, and I went up to LA and recorded it at this amazing studio, and got to hang out with Phil, just he and I, for about an hour in the studio while we were waiting for the engineer, and that was wild, just me and Phil, and
Mm.
we ended up having a really cool conversation, um, and and then of course history is history, and he went on trial and was it was like a mistrial, and then they kind of tried him again, and then he was convicted and went to prison, and ultimately died in prison. And as far as I know, that's the last thing that he was able to
Mhm.
do before he went. And maybe he knew that was going to happen on some level. I don't know, but um, it
Did
was
his
pretty
version,
obvious
the
that.
version that he produced, ever get released the way you guys put it together?
Not exactly. It is in the film. So that was his stipulation. He made it very complicated, and he said you can only release it in the film. Because I think he wanted to see what was going to happen with his trial, and he might want to tweak some things later. He wasn't sure, but he said it's not for commercial release. And so it was aired on the radio one time on Breakfast with the Beatles in LA with Chris Carter.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the only time it's really ever been heard in its entirety, aside from people who might have watched the documentary, which is
But
out there and people can go watch
it's
it.
in the film, so we could listen to that version in the film at the end of the documentary. Great.
You
So
can.
how does the version that Phil worked on with you, Phil Spector worked on you, differ from the vision of producer Nate Rubin and Christian Love?
Well, Nate, that's a whole other crazy story how he and I met. But he had heard my original version when he was like 15 years old, completely coincidentally, because he was like a Phil Spector nut, like
Yeah.
obsessed with his productions. And so he found the song. And anyway, Tim Johnson, this friend of mine who works in radio, connected us because he was working with the Beach Boys and with Christian. And he said, "Hey, I think this guy Nate would do an amazing new version of Crying for John Lennon. We got to get this song out there, man." I was like, "Okay, sure." I mean, this is 20 years later. It's like not even remotely on my radar. And Nate heard the Phil version finally, which he had thought he had been listening to the whole time, which was my demo version, not the Phil version.
Oh,
And he heard the Phil version. He's like, "Whoa!" He's like, "This is epic, man." He's like, "Okay, I'm in. I'll do it. I'll work on it." He's like, "I want to do justice to what Phil did and do it in my own way, but a la Phil Spector, various eras of Phil Spector." and the wall of sound and the same recording techniques and, overdubbing a million acoustic guitars and pianos. I mean, the whole deal. And he really did it. I mean, the session is absurd, like the amount of instruments in there. He really went all the way for the wall of sound. And then, of course, Christian, singing backing vocals and bringing that harmonic, layering to the track, and is just so special. And of course, the Beach Boys connection and all of that is so cool. So, but it's different than the Phil version. And in some ways, I think actually captures more the message of the song in a way. But it's just But it's he was of course deeply inspired by Phil's version, and he wanted to really do honor to that, and so that was kind of the approach.
And that wall of sound that Phil was so known for. Can you describe briefly what a wall of sound is for any of those that don't know?
For sure. So the wall of sound is overdubbing, which is recording multiple versions of the same idea, like stacking it many times. So and oftentimes having multiple musicians playing the same exact part on the same instrument in the same room together to also create, because what happens is you get these harmonics and phasing and weird things that happen when you have that many voices doing the same thing. And so that's what Phil did. He would do 20 acoustic guitars, 20 pianos, 50 strings. It's just like you just keep going, and it's an orchestra basically.
Yeah, wall of sound. I like you mentioned that you stayed true to the original with using Phil Spector's unfinished production as your template. How do you think over all this time you stayed true to that initial spirit of the song, but also at the same time letting it evolve? I mean, can you get that detailed?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it wasn't that easy for me to do my vocals on the song 20 years later. It took me a second to kind of be like, okay, of course I can sing the song, but like, what does this mean to me now as, an adult, and as a father, as, a husband, as the man that I am today versus kind of the kid that I was when I wrote it. And it took a minute to do that. And I just connected back into, honestly, to the spirit of John Lennon. Like I actually asked for his help. I was like, John, if you can do it, help me nail this the way that I want to nail it, and connect into what this is really about. And believe it or not, I felt his energy there with me saying, we're going to sing it together.
You felt him?
And it was literally like, I felt him standing next to me, headphones on. It's like we're side by side singing into
awesome.
The microphone. And I'm like feeling the energy as it's happening. And, it was a surreal experience, to say the least.
So that's twice with this song that you've experienced, something more powerful than just yourself, that you were almost a vessel and a conduit, right? Twice now that's happened.
Yeah.
Did you get chills on this second time like you did on the first?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Big time.
Yeah.
Maybe even more so. I mean, it was, palpable and just, wild experience, to say. I was in the studio with my wife and she was like, what just happened? I was like, I told her what happened. She's like, oh my God, you could hear it like in the booth, back in the control room.
I can't wait to play the song here. We're going to play the song here coming up in its entirety at the end of this interview. I can't wait to hear it now with this new perspective about the making of the song that you just described. I can't wait to hear it again. There was some kind of a couple interesting things that I thought you guys did to recreate that original vision. You used 5 studios. Is that correct?
I think so. I mean, yeah, Nate was
Uh,
doing all kinds of stuff. I know. It was a lot of studios involved. Yeah.
and then, as you just described, you worked from Spector's original session tapes, and then you were striving for that. You guys were all striving for that 60s style production with the big drums and the layer guitars and no modern synths. Why do you think using 5 recording studios was important for the sound, if you know?
I mean, I can't speak for Nate as the producer on that, but my hunch is that, each room sounds different,
Mm,
and also you got to go where the talent is sometimes. And it's like, the drummer's over, he lives in the Midwest. And so it's like, if there's a great drummer who's got the time and he's across town over there, okay, well, we'll bring the session over there, get the drums, and come back over here. I've got a guitar player who can come into my studio and track it. And then he came to Joshua Tree, where we are now, and in my studio, and we did, some guitars and my vocals and some pianos and stuff here. And I think he did maybe even some stuff in LA. I don't recall all the studios he used, but yeah, and then Christian, singing on it and in his studio. And so it's, I guess, a track of the modern times, like,
yeah.
made in that kind of way, in all these different places.
Well, it sounds like when you were going for that layered wall of sound, that might have. That's why I asked the question, because it sounded like some brilliant producers or artists um, idea that really comes to life. I just thought it was kind of cool. I had a neat idea in mind when you showed the demo, or when you were with Phil the first time, and he said it reminded him of a demo maybe that John Lennon might have written or brought to him. How did you even process that compliment? I mean, did it add
Man.
pressure, or did it add? Um, was it inspiring? Like, hey, I'm doing what I love, and it's being received to the level I'm compared to John Lennon, or John Lennon may have written this. I mean, which way did you go with that? I think I would have crumbled under the pressure of that compliment, but how did you take it?
Um, I took it, I think I took it as just like a confirmation that I'm doing what I'm here to do, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and that the message of the song and the intention of the song, I had achieved that, in translating that, and what the song meant to me was coming through. And, because it felt like something that John would have done to me. And so, when I first heard it. And so for Phil to say that, I just felt like a confirmation of that more than anything. And then,
Yeah.
of course, like, there was a part of me that's like, oh my God, what do I even do with that statement? And I
Mm-hmm.
still sort of feel that way to a certain degree. And um, sometimes it's like something I can relate to, and other times I'm just like, oh, uh, it's hard to take in,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. The song's being called a song for peace. And in your view, as an artist, what does it mean today in 2025 for an artist to release a peace anthem?
I can't think of anything better to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm proud of that. I'm super proud of that. I've written about all kinds of different things over the years, and there are a lot of important messages out there in the world for sure, that can come in unexpected ways. But I feel like this is it's important to share these kinds of messages
Yeah. Yeah.
where we can,
I mean, you mentioned the
and in a way that
60s
feels
earlier.
authentic and true.
Uh-huh. And does it feel authentic? Is this truth?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. For sure.
I mean, we can draw conclusions to what it was like in 2004 when you wrote the song, and comparisons, and what it's like in 2025. I mean, but if you happen to listen to this interview or you've been off of Earth for some reason and you don't know what's been going on, or if you look back and listen to this interview years from now, let's mark what's happening. And the message, how is the message from the song relevant now compared to when you wrote it in 2004?
When I wrote it in 2004, the Iraq War was kind of, I think, in its full swing, or getting going for sure. Afghanistan was already happening and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And
After 9/11 and all that.
After 9/11, yeah. And just, it felt like to me at that time, like a time of just total confusion. Like, what are we doing and why are we doing this? It just didn't feel like anything made any sense, especially the war in Iraq. And I feel like with what's happening in the world now, it's like, you look at what's happening in Ukraine, and what's happening in Central Africa, and it's just like, it all feels so unnecessary and confusing and painful to just see the suffering, and it just feels like it just doesn't need to happen. And I also feel that after 2020, many people, I think, finally have woken up to the fact that we're all on this rock together, spinning through space around a giant black hole. Like, there's these lines that we create, cultural lines, or, political lines, or even physical boundaries, they don't mean anything. Like, if something major happens to us all, that's it. It's going to happen to all of us. That could be nuclear war. It could be famine. It could be disease. And that can happen like that. And we've seen that now, I think, in a way that we haven't seen for many generations. And so it just feels like an echo of how things felt then for me, but even more pronounced in many ways. There all of these conflicts all over the world. And so
with more wisdom and more life years, more experience, you see it, maybe feel it a little bit differently. Does it make you feel helpless, or does the music make you feel hopeful? Your message being received give you hope?
Depends on the day. Depends on the day, brother. It's like some
Depends
days
on those
I'm like,
cloud shadows.
There you go. Yeah, pretty much,
Yeah.
But I really try to stay in a hopeful place, because to get into apathy or despair just doesn't fix anything. But sometimes I got to just feel it, and feel the heartache, and feel the pain. And
How much does music give you hope? Sorry, I didn't mean to.
A lot. I mean, it's the way that I process things is through music.
Yeah.
So it's oftentimes the only refuge that I feel when something gets really, really, really strong.
Let's talk just a little bit about how you were raised and how important those lessons that you learned about life are to your songwriting and your music. You were born into a Sikh family, and you were raised in a Kundalini, I'm going to mess that up, I'm so sorry, yoga ashram near Española, New Mexico, which was the first of its kind in the United States and founded by Yogi. Help me with this, because I love the way you say it.
Yogi
Bhajan.
Yeah.
See, I told you I was good. Bhajan, yeah. Yogi Bhajan in the 1970s. And Sikhism is a monotheistic faith founded in 15th century Punjab, India. Its core principles include equality. I love what it stands for. Service, which is seva. Meditation on the divine, Simran, and living truthfully.
Simran,
yeah. The ashram's community practice daily meditation, yoga, chanting, and seva. And I was curious about how this deep spiritual discipline supports your artistry.
Yeah. I mean, it's shaped who I am in such a profound way. You know, I grew up in a very unusual way, probably compared to most Americans, in Eastern culture in many ways, but in the West. Uh, went to boarding school in India and things like that, and um, I think that element of like Sikhism is a really cool spiritual practice in that the Sikhs are, they're warriors that, or they became warriors, I guess I should say, over about a few 100-year period, and were kind of the defenders of northwest India from marauding armies that would come in from the west, from the Middle East, I guess, and but the practice of Sikhism is very much about music. Actually, it's about relating to God or the infinite through the feeling you get when you sing and you chant and you're together in community. And so it's about, they call it the Nam, which means the sound of the identity of the infinite. And so the musical tradition is very rich, and I always related to that, and I love that about Indian culture in general. Um, and so yeah, all of that has had such a huge effect on me, and the yoga, and the meditation, and like a very disciplined approach to all of that growing up. I mean, in many ways, possibly, a bit imbalanced, but useful, um, has shaped me too, and you know, Sikhism, people don't proselytize. They're not out there trying to convert people into Sikhs. Like, and it's not that kind of a thing. We recognize all paths as being the same, leading to the same source. And so I think that ethos of unity and acceptance and respect, um, has been a big part of my life.
And a good thread, I would say, that runs through your music is that of peace and activism. And how do you see music as a vehicle for healing or change? Have you seen it
I th-
firsthand?
hmm.
What it can do, how it
I've
can change,
experienced it
how it can
firsthand.
heal?
Yeah,
Have you experienced?
absolutely. I mean, I think music is one of the most healing things that we can experience because it's so instant. You know, that's why there's music in almost every film that you watch. It's there for a reason because it affects you immediately. Without music, the film would be probably very boring for the most part, uh, and, you know, healing can look a lot of different ways. When I was at boarding school in India, I was miserable and terrified and having the worst time of my entire life, basically. And listening to all this spiritual music and classical Indian music and Cat Stevens, and suddenly someone gave me a Marilyn Manson CD, and it like
Well, Cat
blew my
Stevens,
mind. My
Marilyn
heart
Manson.
started, yeah, quite a diversion,
Yeah.
but I needed that, and it gave me an outlet to experience a part of myself that needed to be expressed, and that was super healing. So it's like you could like, if Marilyn Manson can be healing, like all other kinds of things can be healing too, and that healing can then turn into activism, or it can turn into who knows what, because I think a more empowered person is capable of doing better and greater things.
Unfortunately, this is such a great conversation with you. I really, really enjoying it. But unfortunately, our time has run out. That darn clock that always keeps ticking away. So I've got one last question for you. The famous line from John Lennon that said, "You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one." Does that lyric mean anything to you personally?
Well, of course. Yeah. I mean, I think that's it right there. Uh, we're all, if we choose to be, we can all be ambassadors for a better world.
Yeah.
And there are many of us out there, and John's speaking to that, and Yoko is speaking to that. And yes, I feel like I'm one of those people. I feel like you are probably one of those people, and so many of the amazing humans who help make this song possible are those kind of people, and we're out there everywhere. So the more we find each other and the more we share our gifts, the better.
What a great way to end the show. It's been such a pleasure having you here today, and your story about music. It reminds us that it's not just something we hear, but it can affect powerful change. And it's really, music is something that we live every day. And so thank you for that, for your message. Here is Cryin for John Lennon. Do you want to say anything about it before we go? Anything else?
I think I've said it. Enjoy, you guys. Much love.
Yes,
Thank you.
enjoy. Thank you. Communicate, but listen more and evolve. Everybody have a great week and enjoy.